Do an LS swap. It'll be fun. Do an LS swap. It's easy. You won't even have to buy that many parts. Do an LS swap. It's cheap. Welcome back to Veteran Idiot. I'm Art, and this is the LS SWAT series. So we're on our third episode here. Hopefully we get it started in this one. Probably not though, because I got a lot of wiring to do. I got to depin, repin, run a whole bunch of other stuff. But don't you run away. Promise we got good stuff going on, because I had to go and buy all this crap. So, well, this was an optional upgrade, but well worth it if you ask me. It's the oil and coolant. What else we got in here? We got some isolators from the headers for the spark plug wires, and they are really proud of these things too. Let's see what else we got in here. Do some soldering since my other solder gun decided to die. Fuel filter. I picked up an inline fuel pump too. It's a Walboro 379, I think is what it is. If it's not right, I'll put a correction up here. But I'm going to do an inline one instead of an in-tank pump, since this truck is not fuel injection and doesn't have a pump inside the tank itself. So we're going to do an inline pump that'll be just as good. It's 125 psi or something like that, 300 gallons per hour, and or somewhere around there. I think it's 300. It's going to be way more than we need anyways. Some connectors, lots of connectors, some tape, spark plugs, more oil. Fuel line. You got to get the high pressure line if you're doing fuel injection. Got to get the expensive high pressure stuff. Make sure it's got this green lettering on it, so that the additive, the E85 additive that they add to the fueler, I believe it's E85. Anyways, the ethanol doesn't eat through the rubber. Ooh, cam sensor, spark plug wires. Some more gloves, because that thing is nasty. No, wait, that one's nasty. I gotta clean that up. Crank sensor, oil filter. What do we got in this box? Some bolts and stuff. All the crap I'm rebolting to everything. This one is the knock sensor kit. I'm replacing all these sensors because the engine's out. And in order to get to most of these sensors, it's such a pain. Like the knock sensors are under that plate, under the intake, which is under this Nesta wiring. Might as well just replace them anyways. And then you've got the crank sensor is down in there, which is kind of semi-easy to get to, except for it's right behind the starter, so the starter would have to come out to get to it. And then the cam sensor, all the way back here in the back. That's probably the easiest one to get to. We're just replacing all of those just so it's not an issue. And they were fairly cheap, so not that big of a deal. All right, we got a clutch for the clutch fan, and then the fan itself. And that's about it for this haul. Yeah, I think that's about it. We're just waiting on that fuel pump. But let's go ahead and dive right into what we're going to do. Since we don't have the adapter plate for the transmission, we're going to pull the engine anyways and hook it up to the Turbo 400. And there'll be enough play in here once I get the back of the transmission bolted up and supported that we can slide the engine forward to put the spacer in. I think so. I may regret this later, but I think so. But I need to keep moving forward on this. So what we're going to do is we're going to detach the transmission from this guy, clean it up because it is disgusting, So I'm gonna be wearing most of that in a couple minutes, but let's run that through a time lapse. So a couple things transpired during that time lapse that you may or may not have picked up on. First, puked all the rest of the coolant out of the engine when it tipped forward. That's cool. It'll dry and evaporate. These transmission cooler lines are garbage, so we're going to replace those. And figured out what that noise was in Not Mint when we first fired it up in this episode. Take no oil pressure reading. The mount for the torque converter is snapped off. 1, 2, 1, 2. Oh, it's over here. That's right. All right, so this cheap LS build just got a little bit more expensive. Gonna have to find a torque converter. I'm sure we can find one for fairly cheap. And some of you might have said that we could have kept the Turbo 400 out of Oscar that we put into Not Mint and just kept that one and used that one, which is true, but all that, the whole engine and transmission were together. It's just easier to stab it that way, and that way we have a good reliable one in there, and then we can rebuild this one if we need to, if we found anything else. And it turns out that we did find something else. All right, let's clean it up. So I had somewhat of an epiphany while I was cleaning all the grease off of that transmission, as it was speckling me in the face and little wires were stabbing me from all different directions. I was a brief moment where I considered putting that 4L60 in rather than the Turbo 400. And then I came to my senses and decided, no, I'm just going to continue with the Turbo 400. So now I'm in the search for a converter to put in there. So I'm sure I can find one pretty easy, but I need to get one of those, as well as that spacer. Also, thought of running through all this wiring and depinning this harness and such. Just seems like a massive amount of time, and so I'm going to look as well. I'm going to do some research tonight and look and see if I can't find a decent harness with the factory computer, and we'll see how soon I can get that and how well it'll work for our application. In the meantime, I think I'm going to go in, do some research, see what we can find with this throttle body and torque converter and a harness. I think that's about all the rest of the money we got to throw at this. But really, I want it done right. So it's going to cost a little bit of money. I can't just throw it together. This is something I'm going to be driving all the time. Towing vehicles. It's got to be the thing that's reliable that gets me back here, not the towed vehicle that is unreliable and is getting towed here. So I want it done right. We're going to get it done right, and it's just going to take some time. And so let's go figure it out. Okay, so we're back in the shop. It's been one whole night where I've had things to think about. Brooke is back after riding some horses this morning, so she'll probably fall asleep on the chair over here in a minute. But got the Lord's blueberry juice this morning. So the things we thought about last night. The converter. One thing I want to point out, it's always good to have good friends. Surround yourself with good people. Was able to get a converter from one of my friends, and they'll pick that up in a couple days. And then the harness, we're getting rid of all of this crap because I don't need this, I don't need that, I don't need that, or this, or the transmission, none of that stuff. So a good friend of my cousin's is helping us out building the harness, and I'll put a link to his website and his information on the description of this video. But I'm going to pull this harness off. He's going to send me out a new harness and a flashed ECU, and that way it'll be a nice clean harness that'll just come over and down into the driver's side over here, not all this other garbly goop that we got. So for today, we're feeling a little ambitious today because it's kind of cool in here. Came out a little bit earlier this morning. It's supposed to be 111 outside, so it's probably going to be like 125 in here, but either way, we're going to do some stuff. So we need to pull the intake manifold off, start replacing those sensors. I ordered up a lift plate so I don't have to pull the rest of this stuff off, and we can pull it out, but that won't be here until later this afternoon. So we'll go ahead and pull the intake manifold off, replace those sensors, and may or may not pull the pan on the transmission and replace that filter. I'll probably do it inside the truck once it's connected up. But I've got the fuel pump came in. It's a Walboro 392, and this is an inline fuel pump. This will work for us. And so we'll cut the hard line down there, we'll flare it, splice this in. Takes a 20 amp fuse, we'll get a relay for that and run that over here and off the ignition. But I think there's more. Spark plug wires. Finish up running the fuel lines, and then the rest will have to wait until we get the engine out. I can tap that bolt out of the header, and I'm sure lunch is in there somewhere, right? Yeah, okay. So we'll get started. Ooh, it's looking good. All right, so we got all the stuff off the top here. She did most of the work. Got all the stuff off the top here. Put in the spark plugs, put in the spark plug wires. I'm not worried about putting that kind of stuff on because I'm going to use the lift plate to pull it out as soon as that shows up, so all this stuff can stay on. But I also got the heater hose. This one came off of the 2002 Silverado, and it was here with all the parts that we had. So I threw it on. It lines up perfectly for the heater hoses, and then up through the clamp and into the heater core. So that was pretty awesome. all done on this side as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do the fuel pump. So we need to cut and flare the fuel line, probably all the way up to the tank there. I also want to get some sort of new transfer valve between the two. This valve's not working. So anyways, we're going to cut the line down here and flare it, and then throw in this fuel pump and get a relay, wire it in, and then it should be good to go with that. So we got fuel pressure. All right, I'm back, and took a little break to pull out the inner fender and paint it, cleaned it up, spent about an hour or so grinding away on this sucker, cleaned it up and painted it. It was just not looking great. So I'll pull out the other one and paint that one as well. But right now, the lift plate showed up. So we're gonna go ahead and pull this thing out of here, and I can get to that oil pressure fitting back there, change that out, put the flywheel on, and I'll pick up the spacer and torque converter tomorrow, and then we'll throw the transmission on, and then it'll all go back in. So let's go ahead and yank this guy out of here. All right, engine's out. There's our little guy. Man, I wish I had noticed that before I put all this together. All right, so we'll drill and tap that sucker out of there. Hopefully it's not too bad. All right, we're foiled again. I got it drilled out, but I don't have the right size tap for it, so gonna have to wait till tomorrow. It's exciting, right? But at least tomorrow we have the converter and everything else, so we'll just put it all right back together. Besides that, everything else is done. Flex plates on, starters on. Just need to put that spacer on and then the transmission. So on to tomorrow. Whew. All right, it's been a couple days since last we saw. It's been way too hot. It's been like 120 degrees in the shop, and just can't deal with it. So we're back. Broke down. Got me one of these guys here. This thing is amazing, by the way. I don't know how well it works in like humid climates, but in a dry climate, this thing is amazing. It is like 30 degrees difference between right there and right here in front of where this is blowing. I closed the back there. Hopefully we can cool down some in here, but it's amazing. Really excited about having it in here. I don't know if you can see it down there, but it's from affordacool.com. Check it out. Great prices. Not a promotion, not paying me to do this. Just really like this product. Good stuff. Figured I'd share. Anyways, back to this guy. Still got to tap that other bolt out of there. I got it drilled out, but I just can't get the rest of the threads out of it, so I got to go get a tap and die set, and we'll pull it out of there. But I got the torque converter and the spacer. Where's the torque converter? Oh, here it is. Okay, we're good. Got the torque converter, the spacer. We're going to put the transmission on. The cooler lines are coming later, but we're going to put all that stuff on. So with this LS and this Turbo 400, this flex plate has a bit of a dish on it. And so in order to meet the converter for the Turbo 400, which is practically flush between the mounting bolts and the snout, you put this little guy on here. Goes right into the crank, like so, and then the snout of the torque converter fits in there, and it mates up that space so the torque converter isn't just floating. So I got that, throw it all together, and with that and tapping that bolt out, I can bolt everything back on, drop it in, finish up the fuel system. Had to get a fuel regulator from a C5 Corvette. Because I'm using that inline fuel pump, and this does not have, well actually I think it works for the in-tank fuel pump too, but anyways, the fuel lines that are on this Gen 3 L59 don't have a return, so you got to limit their PSI to 56. And so how we do that is we use an inline fuel pressure regulator from a C5 Corvette, and it's got an inlet, and I'll show you a little bit later once it shows up. It's got an inlet and then an immediate return off the same side, and then an outlet that comes up front. Fuel filter can go in front, behind, whichever. And I believe it has some sort of filter inside of it. I'm not for sure, don't quote me on that. But anyway, so that will go in there. It's a relatively cheap product. Return it back into the fuel tanks the way we need it. Now this inline pump, it should be said that they are prone to overheating, and reliability is a little less than the ones that are in the tank that are cooled by the fuel. But this one will get us down the road for quite some time, and we'll have to get 2 EFI tanks to with the hangers to go in there. Holley sells a kit that has a EFI hanger, or fuel pump hanger, that goes inside the tank that meets these tanks, but is just as much as the other EFI tanks. So we'll get those tanks at some point. We've got a transfer switch to fix the transfer pump. And all right, guy, all right, I'm done talking. We'll get it to work. Geez, the guy in the back's a little impatient. All right, so let's go. After further investigation, I got the transmission up on the block. Couldn't get the converter to line up for it, so it turns out that the factory flex plate does not work for the particular torque converter that I have for the 400. So I went and picked up this flex plate here. I'll throw the part number down in the description. But basically it just has a bunch of different size bolt patterns for torque converters and this conversion. So we'll still use the spacer on the snout, but we'll throw this flex plate in, and then we should be able to bolt everything back up. We'll get it back up there. Also, because of the way that the exhaust comes down in this direction, there's a little ear on the 400 that sticks out. I have to cut that off, and I'll have to do the same thing on the other side here in order to get the headers to clear for that. So that's just another thing to throw on the list, but we're getting there. I think it's finally ready to stab for the last time. Got the couplers on and O2 sensors, transmission's mounted up, the torque converter is finally taken care of. Tapped the head for that bolt that broke off. Had to put a larger bolt in there. It wouldn't completely tap straight, so it is what it is, but it fits and it's tight. Everything's ready to go. Just need to throw it in here now, hopefully for the last time. Then we can start running all the fuel, put everything on top, and then just wait for the harness to show up, which should be here at the end of the week. That way we can get this thing fired up. Follow me for more tips. Let's get this thing back together. Well, I'm worn out. It is dark outside, and I've got this thing pretty much buttoned up. It's all wired in as far as what I can wire with the factory harness over. I just need to change out this plug and switch it to this type of plug here. Routed it underneath the intake manifold, down, around into the starter. All that factory stuff can be reused, and I just need to run a power over to the harness when the harness gets here. Should be able to keep the battery in the same position and do all that stuff. So everything else should be good. Just plugging in the harness. I did get a pedal, throttle pedal, so we do need to put that in. Not going to do that tonight though. The only thing left is I got to put this whole fuel system. Don't judge me by my toolbox right now. It's been a long day. Fuel pump, fuel filter, and then the fuel regulator. So all that's going to go in tomorrow. Up front here, this return line is not going to get reused, but I'm going to leave it in place in case we upgrade the fuel system or anything else like that. But this line goes up around the back there and then into the factory one where there's no return line on these rails. I got to get some bolts for this guy tomorrow at the store. But man, this was fun. It's going to be a good truck. I'm excited. So we'll come back at it tomorrow, get all that fuel pump stuff put in, put some power to it, see if we can't push some fuel forward and bleed it out the top over here. And then maybe we can check that guy off up there. Still waiting on the harness though. Always something, always something. See you in the morning. Woo! We're back. The heat has not gone away. Still here. Before I turned on the swamp cooler, it was 120 in here. That was awesome. And then it took like 30 minutes for the swamp cooler to take full effect. So during that 30 minutes, it was like 7,000% humidity. So that was cool too. But now that it's full swing, we're good to go. We're down to 98 degrees. But anyways, so what I'm gonna do today is wire in this bad boy and get it mounted up. So I was talking about before with the C5 fuel pressure regulator, you got an inlet and then a return, 56 PSI out to the engine. This will just return back to the normal return location. Fuel filter pre-pump. This type of pump will pull and push. It prefers a little bit of gravity to it, but it will pull and push and it'll work pretty well. They just tend to overheat some, so we're going to try keep it away from exhaust as well. This is something we can do to keep the temperature down on it. We'll keep it lasting for a while. So we're going with high pressure clamps. After the fuel pump, need to swap this one out for a high pressure clamp, but we're going to throw this under the frame rail. All right, so here's what we're looking at with our fuel setup. This is the diversion valve or the transfer valve from one tank to the other. The switch it needs to replace inside the cap. I got a new one of those coming, but so we got the return and the primary or the main forward to the filter to the pump, and then to the fuel regulator with the return line. And that return line comes back and goes back into there. It goes up, already pressure tested, hooked it up to power, ran it, it returns back into the tank. And that's pretty much it with the fuel system. Should be good to go. Up on top, next thing we're going to tackle is this modulator here. We need to run the vacuum from up there to here. Pretty sure we can reuse the tube for it. The thing that's going to be an issue, I think, is getting it off of that vacuum line that runs to the power brakes. So we're gonna have to tee off of that and then run it back. See where the tube comes out. May have to do some bending and stuff like that. We're gonna have to tee it in off of this line here somewhere. Probably right around here, and then the tube go down back behind that way. Let's give it a try. What I'm hoping is I can get this little guy right in there, and that'll feed 1/4-inch vacuum over to our vacuum line for the modulator. Let's see. So I'm digging through all this, figuring out how am I gonna get this friggin' thing in here. That size is so much bigger. So I cut that, realized it's too big. Went to this, I was like, oh, I'll try and extend that a little bit, put it in there. Then I'm looking around, and there's a little friggin' vacuum port right here, where you just snap the top off of it, and it gives you another accessory for vacuum. So, now we got it all hooked up. Modulators, good to go. We need to put a T on this guy or a bus. That way it can go over into the washer fluid in the vacuum canister, all that business. So all that stuff works. That's pretty much going to do it for this episode. Fuel's all run, vacuum's all set up for the transmission. We're hooked up to the drive shaft, all the mounts are tight, everything's good to go, everything's plumbed, other than the radiator and the transmission cooler, stuff like that. But make sure you stay tuned for the next episode where we throw the harness on this thing, button up a couple little things, and it's going to fire up. We're going to fire this thing right up. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'm happy to have you with me. Until next time, see you then.